Good afternoon, everyone. We'll be beginning with our final session, a closed group discussion. I request all the speakers and moderators to come on the dais. Architect Murdula Mane will be moderating the session.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone is effectively back after delicious lunch and awake as well. Well, there is a slight change from our original plan. Dr. Pushkar Soni was supposed to moderate this session, but he could not be here due to some reasons. So what we have decided is I would like to invite moderators of other sessions, like I moderated fort conservation, Dr. Garge moderated the first session on religious, conservation of religious heritage, and architect Archana, she moderated the last session. So I would like to invite both of them also on the dais, and we will try to kind of discuss and bring forth some of the challenges that came forward during all the three sessions of this conference on conservation and management of built heritage in Maharashtra. So can we have both of you here? Well, when we started conceptualizing this conference, the idea was, or the aim behind this conference was, to take cognizance of all the ongoing conservation efforts in Maharashtra and also to discuss the way forward. And in order to discuss the way forward, one important step in between is to understand the challenges and gaps in the current situations. And I believe that all the sessions and all the presenters have very successfully discussed their experiences, have articulated various solutions that they are following in a very interesting manner. And from moving forward from that, first I would like to request Dr. Garge to summarize the first session and even share your thoughts on how we can go forward in that particular category.
So I think all of us, you can recall our first session on religious architecture, and mostly it was focused on temple architecture conservation. There are three interesting presentations by Kiran Kalamdani or Kimaya firm, then followed by Ajinkya Tara, and then by TA Associates. So interestingly, the first one was basically about reconstruction of a part which was totally missing. And many people cautioned me that we should not put forward such controversial topic as the opening paper of any conference. But I'm willing to take that risk. Usually, we try to avoid disputable topics. We prefer not to start. We prefer to start on happy note. So we tried reverse. We tried it in reverse order, and I think this is a long-term problem which community of conservators is going to face. We'll be poised with many questions. Recently, we experienced demolition of a temple in Konkan, where community chose to dismantle it. On the other hand, Ajinkya Associate had shown us a different project of Gupteshwar, where community waited for almost 4.5 years. I recall when I joined as a department, joined as the director in this department, it was the first request ever made from the village community that you need to take cognizance of the temple which is deteriorating. We said it's a huge project, it will require 30-40 crores and the budget does not allow, and so we'll try. Budget कहाँ से मिलेगा? तो चलो मंत्रालय, let us go together. And they said कि कितना लगेगा? So कितना लगेगा तो the scientific answer is you put a conservation architect in place, you do estimation and you come out with a proper figure. And then COVID happened, but still they were with us. They did not took matter into their hands. They waited for 5 years, and finally project has taken off scientifically. So as part of Conservators of Living Heritage, it is going to be a challenge, a bigger challenge in future. And unless we discuss about it, unless we talk about it, we are not going to come up with any scientific measures. Many of us have certain black and white questions. We are looking for ready-made formulas. And my dear friends, conservation of each monument is a unique problem which you will not be able to fit it into any ready-made formula. Whatever Marshall prescribed are guidelines. Whatever Act says are certain boundings put forward by the government, and they also moreover work like guidelines. It is up to our conscience how do we apply that. So I think that particular session has opened up a new dialogue, and I hope to have this literature in print also, as Janviji mentioned yesterday, and vice versa dialogue. I actually miss that academic era where people had debates through articles, where people used to fight in conferences. Now, people deliver a lecture, audience is bored, they dozed off, there are no more questions, there are no more academic fights, there are no more papers questioning each other's theories. So I hope to open up that kind of dialogue among the conservators who are not only thinkers but who also write. My appeal to all young practicing conservation architects. Yesterday we saw a new thing, small films. Architects are talking about their own project. This is something new to me. I was expecting blank presentations, but that was a welcome addition. Similarly, I want to see research articles which gets published in peer-reviewed journals. Or can we have that kind of credibility to our own works? And unless we debate, discuss these philosophical aspects, I don't think so there is any way out forward. We'll be stuck in the same loop, and we will be keeping aside all the problematic topics, and we'll be doing straightforward work. So do we want to do that, or we want to opt something out of the box? That was my intention, to keep that paper first. Then second paper on Sundar Narayan, that was also heavily debated within department, that whether we should go for such renovation. I'm using this term on purpose. Such extent of reconstruction for that Sundar Narayan temple. If you look at original stone, it had deteriorated so much. It had converted almost into jali kind of thing. So structural strength was missing, and that monument was bound to crumble within, say, a decade or so. So I think an early call was taken, and it almost looks like a renovated fabric. So even I think this also needs to be debated. I mean, if we are doing intervention, if we are doing conservation, up to what extent we should be doing it? You know, of course, the Gupteshwar is still in process. The work is still in initial phase. So there was some interesting question about how we are planning to conserve those brickworks. How are we actually going to lift it into pieces? And also people were carefully listening. So thank you for all those questions. So I hope this reflects into our conservation practices. That is what my intention was, to have this series of papers. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. Well, maybe we can have maximum 1 or 2 questions for the first session. Is there a mic in the audience?
The way we have a journal of IIA, the way we architects are having a journal of IIA, Indian Institute of Architects journal is there. It is a publication there. So can we have such kind of journal or publication, or either we are having earlier, I don't know. So can we start with such kind of activities to promote research and the students of heritage conservation to write research into that journal, so we can have all together the collection of research at Indian level. Is that possible, sir?
Yes, definitely. Do we have Dr. Mayur Thakur in audience? Well, this is the gentleman assigned with a duty to run one journal through directorate called Mahapurarutta. So we are hoping to have these review articles. This is not exactly on the basis of Indian archaeology review, but slightly detailer than that, but not as lengthy as proper research papers. But one can know what is going on in the department and through what thought process. So we are planning to launch that soon.
Yeah, it will be really good, sir. And aggregate data we can have.
Right,
even
right.
the ASI can have that data.
Thank you. Thank you.
We heard through various examples that sometimes there are conflicts within stakeholders. There are choices made by conservation architects. You as director and the officials of archaeology department have intervened and changed few things. Now this process is happening. There is a give and take, which is a good thing. I wanted to ask, just like we have for ecologically sensitive projects, we have public consultations. Can we have a formal sort of public consultations for conservation work, where if you declare certain site for conservation and you invite conservation architects, tenders and so on, similarly there can be a parallel process where you can have public consultation, where people can send in their informed opinions, and so it will be formalized. Instead of having a contestation on the side about the conservation choices, if we can have a formalized process of some kind where there are wider public consultation, where people, experts, various stakeholders can get involved, it will be very beneficial for the So kind of smoothing out the friction that happens, and it can also bring in, can give us an opportunity to bring in various the scholarly discourse which is associated with these areas. What are the local people's concerns about celebration and living heritage and so on. So I would really like to appeal to Directorate if they can come up with such kind of systematized process for this, because more and more conservation projects are in line, and I see this debate growing. And as you rightly said, we need to have a dialogue. We need not start on a contested footing. So I just would like to appeal if we can have some sort of public consultation, just because this is an irreparable and irreversible change that happens. Sometimes if we cannot reverse this change, then definitely we can step back and actually think as to whether we should go ahead and think twice.
Point is well taken. We'll definitely have it in little more ideal scenario.
Yeah. Sorry, due to lack of time, we won't be able to take more questions for each session. So after the discussions related to the religious heritage, yesterday we moved on to the ongoing conservation efforts regarding forts in Maharashtra. I know it was a very rushed through session, but although it happened, I think we had 3 very different typologies. And by typologies, I don't just mean by architectural typologies, but also typologies in terms of the jurisdiction and the authority by which these forts are maintained or taken care of. We started with architect Shwetambari and architect Sapna's presentation about Ghodbandar and Ausa Fort. Ghodbandar and Ausa Fort. It was also interesting to see kind of the choices that are being made in terms of philosophical approach of conservation. While one example falls in the category of almost adaptive reuse, the other one is more methodical approach about where to intervene, like where not to intervene. I think your presentation really bring forward all those difficult choices. And as Dr. Garge also mentioned earlier, I think one of the most appealing thing was that you are taking very conscious efforts to document what. I think that is one really major aspect that is missing from present conservation practice, that we are not often very conscious about the ongoing processes and keeping a very methodical track record of those ongoing processes and reflecting upon those. So I think your presentations were really successful in bringing forward those aspects. And also like having like really detailed discussion about the coastal heritage was very interesting, especially on the background of all these issues related to climate change that we are facing. It's not only the structural aspect of this typology, but the kind of rate of deterioration that we are facing for coastal heritage. I think that is one point we really need to bring attention to. So Dr. Shubha's presentation was really helpful for that, and also to understand ASI's way of working. So personally also for me, that was very enlightening. And the stark contrast between how work of empaneled architects kind of go on and how ASI is able to conduct it. In certain ways, from my perspective, I do feel that ASI do have kind of a very privileged position.
Without involving conservation architects.
Yes. So I think it would be, in future, it would be really helpful. Like, I know that ASI does conduct conservation camps. So if there can be this kind of dialogue between state-sponsored or like your in-house projects and some sort of training hand-holding program for empaneled architects, that will be really helpful, especially for the monuments. Because relatively choices are, I wouldn't say easy, but it's relatively it's easy to live with the consequences of choices in case of religious or in case of residential buildings. Because there is like, you know, lot of collective responsibility by different communities and different stakeholders. But what is happening in case of forts is that it is relatively, I would say, a lonely journey for conservation professional. There is lot of onus on conservation architects for the choices that they are making. And at the same time, the kind of public attention that this category is facing is scary. I mean, I know this is being live streamed, but I would really say that everyone is aware of, or everyone is promoting the community involvement, but we should also be very careful about what that community involvement, what are the implications of that community involvement on the monument itself for long term. And this I'm trying to say with all due respect to the emotional and social involvement. The parallel is that, when we go to the doctor, we respect opinion of that doctor or of that expert. In same way, I think as conservation professionals, there is a need that we need to have a better agency. Very often, the views are not very well received under the disguise of, respecting community efforts. But there has to be a better negotiations and dialogues between conservation professionals and the community aspirations. And while it was very interesting to look at what ASI is following, I think there can be some kind of bridging that gap between these other conservation efforts and ASI's practices. And in that sense, Architect Tejaswini's presentation about Navdurga was also enlightening. And for me, what it bring forward was this, that I don't think we have a very well articulated or kind of very well theorized way of fort architecture in Maharashtra. We don't have that very clear articulation of what it means by the architectural style of different forts, which is done by architects. Most of the literature and material that is presently available is actually by historians. And so if you look at all three presentations, everyone had to invest so much on the historical aspect or historical study to understand the architectural part that it takes kind of, your time away from conservation efforts. So in that sense, if we can take more structured and collective efforts related to coming up with publications on fort architecture in Maharashtra, which is actually studied by architects, and some better categories, so that can develop a baseline data. Presently, we don't have that sort of baseline data. At least these are kind of my views, and also I hope that later on Dr. Menon's presentation will also address the issues related to the material analysis. That is one major challenge presently for fort conservation in Maharashtra. So yeah, these are my thoughts.
I think we are in short of time, so we are keeping again some time for question and answer session. But I forgot to mention ASI presentation and what they are doing in Vidarbha in terms of conservation of temples. So that was wonderfully demonstrated, and we could see the contrast between two styles or two philosophical choices of working. And I'm extremely sorry, I forgot to mention our Jejuri project, which we are trying to project as a model project throughout the state. So if at all you want to approach a living temple, this is how it should be. So I hope in future we will be following this Jejuri formula all over the state, because it has taken a lot of patience to consult with the stakeholders, with the locals, with administration, with religious devotees and whatnot. So consultation has taken about 3 years of project designing's time. So we hope to shorten it a bit and execute that project in a proper manner. Thank you. Over to you.
What do I say? So about the fort conservation, we are also working on few forts, and that particular category was not actually, considered in anyone's presentations yesterday, which is actually hill forts, which are Durgam. Durgam is basically the entire Maharashtra is known for. And we are working on forts like Sudhagad and Koraigad and Sinhagad, which are all hill forts and which are extremely difficult to work in conditions. There are conditions like, the multiple stakeholders where you have our state archaeology, one of the departments, then you have local communities which are dependent on the fort for their livelihood, Then there is departments like forest departments and irrigation maybe and other departments involved. So working on multiple stakeholders is also another important issue, because your truckload, the forest don't let it go. So we have to consider head load. So otherwise we have to consider few animals, like गधे ऊपर चढ़ाने पड़ता है. So there are like a lot of serious issues, and this is basically Department of Archaeology. So archaeology should also be considered somewhere where there are archaeological excavations going on in all over Maharashtra. Then there are, even on the forts, we do the scientific excavations where the layers of fort comes out, and how to stabilize those ruins, and whether to keep it as ruins or then you build a vada there. So these are also some of the debatable topics that needed to cover. And when we face challenges like these hill forts have their own way of acting. The geology, environment is not in our hand. The vegetation is going to grow. The rock fall is going to happen somewhere. I have also faced a landslide somewhere. So these are some really thorough aspect that we need to look beyond the archaeology and conservation. So these are ecological conservation, geological conservation. These issues should also be addressed when it comes to conservation. So then it will only be a holistic project, I would say. So these are a few thoughts, and I think the hill forts something that we need to discuss, because these are most difficult terrains that people work on. Sometimes you have to build that wall, and you don't know. Sometimes even I have to wear a harness and go to at such sites, and because I have to understand my people's problem. I have to understand what Mason is working on. Then only I will solve his problem. So these are some challenging tasks. So, as an architect, we have to be on a role of various, like even for tracker and, like an architect or even an anthropologist or even, a considerate one, basically, to understand all the issues together and be the mediator of all these centric problems. So I think that is it for now. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Mrudula.